Good morning. It's February 23rd, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is our Western Standards weekly or daily live show. Comes 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, starting at 11:30 a.m. I welcome the comments and interaction. That's the great thing of being live. I'm going to start right off the bat, actually. I see somebody came in early, Ty F, and made a comment with a question. And it's about the Senate. He's wondering how it works. Is it the same as the House when voting with a majority and things like that? Because the Emergencies Act now is going to the Senate, and it theoretically could get shut down in there. Any legislation actually has to go through a few steps in Canada. It has to go through Parliament and then through the Senate, and then has to get royal assent from the Governor General. Governor General will pretty much never say no to giving royal assent, though a lot of people seem to feel that they could pressure or change her to do so. But the Senate, they can shut something down. Quick question from somebody else. Is it true that 20 senators have to sign a petition against the act to revoke it? No, that's not true. It will have to go before them. It's like Parliament. It's very similar. And if a majority of senators support the bill, it will go through and it will pass. And they were appointed. The majority of them were appointed by the Prime Minister. He calls them independent, but it's BS. They're liberals. I hope. I really do. I mean, some of them might have principle and they don't have to, they can't get kicked out by the Prime Minister or anything like that. Some could stand up and say, you know what, we just don't need this thing. We're going to shut this thing down. It's finished. And they could do it. I hope so. I don't hold out a lot of hope on it, but it is a possibility. It is the chamber of sober second thought, as they put it, though I'm certain a lot of them aren't terribly sober. I don't blame them. If I had to sit in that place all the time, I'd probably go back to drinking as well. So today we've got Alberta Proud president. She's coming in studio, Lindsay Seewald, and she wrote a column on the Western Standard recently on uneven Stephen Guilbeault, our federal minister of mayhem there from Justin Trudeau, the fellow who likes to get arrested now and then, is a senior cabinet minister in the Trudeau government. It says a lot about the priorities of that government. And then Jeff Callaway is going to join me. He's the CEO of Algonaut Capital, and they run a business in an actually, and again, full disclosure, it's one of the sponsors, but it's a marketplace for digital currencies. And of course, right now is certainly a time when people are interested and looking into digital currencies and wondering if that's the way to go. Well, Jeff's going to be able to lay out in more detail how that digital currency world works, how trading works in it, and other such things as that. So I'll get going with what's got me going today. And I'm not really as triggered as always. I'm triggered by a lot of things, and I'm sure to rant about more of them over the course of the show. I do on occasion like to note positive trends, if nothing else, for the immediate term. And I like right now where the Alberta government's going. For starters, all the provincial pandemic mandates are going to be lifted at the end of this month. We're no longer going to be compelled to be masked. Gatherings won't be limited. Businesses can return to regular hours, and people can choose to return to their offices. Now, I know this should have happened long ago. I'll still maintain a better late than never attitude here. We could be stuck under a maniac like Doug Ford, who's clearly living in abject terror of COVID-19, or an authoritarian socialist like Rachel Notley, who's constantly signaled she would have kept Alberta in full lockdown mode for the last 2 years. We'll actually be able to get up from a table at a restaurant, walk to a washroom, and walk back again without putting a mask on. We'll be able to communicate with neighboring tables if we choose to, and actually stand up and join them if we like. I mean, I'm a married introvert, so I won't be taking advantage of those social opportunities, but I'm happy that my fellow citizens will be able to enjoy those freedoms again. Kids will even be able to play hockey without being assailed by the police. Marvelous, isn't it? Restaurant and bars have got to be gasping in relief as they can resume normal operations, and perhaps our tourism sector might begin to recover because they've just been beaten on. We know the government's backtracked on these reopenings before, but let's celebrate what we have so far and look to Ottawa where the real problem remains. On the federal front, Trudeau remains insistent on keeping us in a state of martial law, though no current emergency can be identified. Premier Kenney is going to be launching a court challenge to that. And while I don't hold out much faith in our courts, it's at least more than the typical strongly worded letter we get from the Premier's office when the federal government's screwing us, which happens quite often. 7 out of 10 premiers in Canada are in opposition to Trudeau's power grab, though the legacy media certainly doesn't like mentioning that. So, not to celebrate world disorder, anyways, getting back to my optimism in another way, the catastrophe in Ukraine with Russia, coupled with years of idiocy in Europe in pursuing green energy sources, it's made oil and gas prices skyrocket, and they're likely going to remain high. This benefits Alberta greatly for both private employers and government. We might actually see a provincial balanced budget in the foreseeable future, while no other province can claim that. Of course, with the federal government prone to stealing the assets of citizens, that's going to put a big target on Alberta's back in the long run, but in the short term, it's definitely good for us. Now, the provincial government has been speaking about the need to reform the health system in order to increase capacity. This is the kind of language we need to hear. Of course, we'll actually need to see action as well. I mean, hospital capacity has been the prime excuse for imposing lockdowns and restrictions, and it's nuts that we haven't seriously worked to expand it. The Kenney government dared to open the Pandora's box of talking about increasing private provision of service. This has, of course, set Notley and her union bosses into a tizzy. The NDP will only ever support pouring more money into a broken system. Their goal is to increase union jobs at all costs, and it shows. We need to enter this battle with the Alberta Health Services bloated bureaucracy and the unions. And if this move by the UCP government turns into the catalyst for that battle, all the better. We need to change the system. The government has plans for more support for victims of crime. One of those aspects is a right to know legislation, which will keep victims in the loop as criminals go through the system. My pub was repeatedly robbed by a gang of criminals 2 years ago, back when I owned a pub. Those thugs, while they were out in bail, 2 of them actually murdered 2 people in 2 separate crimes. It would have been nice to know that these criminals were loose as a victim of them, in a robbery, so I could make sure the combination on one of my locks was only one number from opening, if you know what I mean. Respecting the criminal justice system, respecting, changing things, reforming it as long overdue, and respecting victims' rights. The government looks willing to end the conflict of interest with the teachers union too, as they're the sole disciplinary body for their own teachers. This is long overdue, and parents are more than tired of hearing about the teachers union giving 2-year suspensions to sex offending teachers. Again, another battle that needs to be had. So the language is right. The UCP government sounds as if they plan to be a government remaining true to conservative principles. Now, we also know this government can be prone to talking tough while walking weak. Remember the Fair Deal panel? Still, we should applaud them when they appear to be moving in the right direction. It'll give us more strength to rip into them when they deviate from the path they promised. We may or may not see a new leader of the UCP in the next few months. For now, though, the party's moving in the right direction, and I'm guardedly optimistic. Let's set our sights for now on Ottawa, where the most pressing threats to our liberties remain, and hope that our provincial government stays true to good conservative principles. And I'm just going to need my earpiece before I bring in our news check with Dave. There we go. And we're going to talk with our news editor, Dave Naylor, who's hammering away there in the newsroom. He should be here in just a moment. Okay, I don't see him, but we're going to talk to him as soon as he's there. And there we go. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Good. You're getting me a bit worried there, Cory.
No, it was on my end. We've got a unique thing happening today. Both of my guests are coming in live. And we thought, hey, I finally don't need that earpiece to listen to somebody remotely. And I'm sorry, but we completely overlooked your daily appearance. We take it for granted, and I'm forever apologetic to you.
I guess must have been cold at the old homestead this morning, Cory.
Oh, it was. I'm going to go on about that later.
Yeah, I think I'm finally starting to thaw out. But we got some good stories up already this morning on the Western Standard Online website, Cory, including dramatic video from a police shooting in Calgary in the Forest Lawn community at Saturday afternoon, where they were called about a man with weapons who had been attacking people. They arrived at the scene to find a young man, obviously having mental issues, with a knife and some sort of stick that he was using to threaten people. The man finally stood up. The police aimed several what they call less lethal rounds at him, basically a beanbag gun that hurts. Those had no effect on him, and he started running towards the police, stabbing a police dog repeatedly. The officers tried tasering him again to no effect, and finally they had to use deadly force. Mayor Gondek is questioning the police in this incident. She says how they handled it brings into lots of questions about why mental health supports weren't on the scene immediately. So I guess Mayor Gondek has a lot to learn how the police operate, and maybe some questions will be answered at the police commission meeting later on today in Calgary. Other stuff, Cory, you may or may not be surprised to learn that the judge that refused to release Freedom Convoy organizer Tamara Leitch is a liberal. She, in fact, ran for Justin Trudeau's Liberal as a candidate and actually lost out. But that hasn't stopped her from donating to the Liberal Party. And eventually, Trudeau made her a judge. So this is who's deciding whether or not a Convoy freedom organizer gets to go home while awaiting trial. Our military affairs analyst, Dave Makachuk, has written a column on Justin Trudeau's sanctions against Vladimir Putin over the looming invasion of the Ukraine, excuse me. Fair hint, Dave's not exactly thrilled with Trudeau's actions, that he says Putin will certainly not be worried about them in any way, shape whatsoever. Big day tomorrow in Alberta politics, Cory, as the budget comes down. We've got an advancer from our legislature reporter, Amber Goslin, talking to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and people like that about what they want to see in the budget. Our Saskatchewan reporter, Lee Harding, has got a story about the mainstream media unfairly taking shots at former Newfoundland Premier Brian Peckford and Barry Cooper, a respected UFC political scientist. And talking about the feds freezing money, they admit that people who donated $20 to the Freedom Convoy could have their bank accounts frozen. Very disturbing politicalization of the RCMP and the banks. So that's what we've got up there now. We've got more stories to come this afternoon, including our Mel Risden's been doing a deep dive into some fairly shocking AHS statistics on hospital closures in the province, and she'll have that out coming up shortly. And there's some very ugly numbers in there, Cory.
Yeah, lots of ugly news, occasionally some positive news. I actually started by triggered with being a little less triggered than usual, but you've brought me back down. Now I'm crabby again. But,
sorry, Cory.
Well, we can't always report
what
on
I do.
butterflies and sunshine. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Lots to cover as always. So I'll let you get back to hammering the keyboards and yelling at the interns, and we'll carry on with the show.
Yeah, and we'll see you later on for the pipeline.
You betcha. That's right. That's on this afternoon. I tend to forget. All right. So that was our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yeah, it's just going great guns in the newsroom as always and as usual. We've got a growing team. Derek's been putting ads out. If you look on the Western Standard site, we are seeking reporters and other contributors, all sorts of things. And subscriptions have been going through the roof. I mean, people are realizing this is where to get the news. This is how to get the news. The mainstream is just, unfortunately, irreparably sick. We can't repair that institution. So what do we got here? We're going to have a guest coming in soon, but I'm not ready for her yet. So we're going to start preparing for that. Where the heck was I? So something else that we're doing with our expansion is we're moving into a larger studio downstairs, and it's got a great glass wall, and I'll be able to see who's coming and going, and we're going to be able to improve that product. And poor Nico won't be squashed just a few feet from me for hours at a time as he is right now. I just, before I get to that guest too, I want to talk about some of those news things Dave was talking about. One of which is that case with the judge holding Tamara Lich in jail without bail. She can't go out. I mean, so if you know how the justice systems work, typically they'll ask, they'll put some conditions on, say, you can't go near the organizers, you can't go near the protest spots, you can go home, you can't do social media postings, things like that. If you commit to doing those things, not further committing any offenses, they'll let you out and you can stay home until your trial. But they denied that, even though Lich was cooperative. In the courtroom, she said she would abide by conditions and was willing to do so. But the judge, who was appointed by Trudeau, who ran for Trudeau, said, no, we're going to keep you in jail where you can't speak, where you're silenced, where you're kept from your family, where you're kept from your home, because you were a convoy organizer, a threat to society. Now, in parallel, David Zigrak, look him up. This is the guy who ran through protesters in Manitoba against convoy protesters, a left-wing lunatic. He's got a terrible history, this man, on social media and online. And I should say allegedly, he's been charged with running through those people. Terribly dangerous. Only one person got injured. The video was very disturbing. This is a dangerous person. This is the sort of person you got to wonder whether you could safely release them out into society or not. He was given bail. Within days, he's out on the streets, walking around. They did say he's not allowed to drive. That's good. With luck, he's not going to try and kill people further again, if that's allegedly what he had done. But what a double standard. I mean, again, if you were a judge, you're sitting on a seat. Who seems to be more dangerous? A person who was organizing protests, who was saying again that they're not going to do anything further until things go through the courts, just let them go home to their seized bank accounts and try and live on. Or a person who took a motor vehicle and literally drove it through a number of people who were holding a peaceful protest. Well, in Canada, apparently, the motor vehicle terrorist is the lesser of the dangerous people. Canada's system's a mess. There's no doubt about it. As other people are pointing out, the judge, the conflict of interest on her part. That's the way the system works. Unfortunately, you run for the Liberal Party, and you know what? Conservatives are guilty of it as well. If you get cannon fodder candidates, ones who are just going to run to fill a spot, even though they don't have a high chance of winning, if their party forms government, you get the reward later. If you look for who ends up being ambassadors or gets postings on commissions and things like that pay very well, or lawyers who end up as judges, it's not terribly uncommon that they took a run for the party in a riding where they didn't have a good chance of winning, and that's their reward for it later. Unfortunately, particularly when it comes to judges, we end up with some people on the bench who are conceivably very beholden to the administration and the party in power, and it's not a good place to be. Canada, the Americans aren't much better with the politicization of their judges. We try to keep justices to be as impartial as possible. It's a difficult system when it comes that way, and it's hard to avoid. But in this case, having somebody who was actually ran for the Liberal Party sitting on the bench and ruling on this is distressing, and it's hard to believe that wouldn't have impacted this judge's decision not to have given bail to Tamara Lich. So hopefully she gets out soon, and again, let the justice system move forward with that as is appropriate in the time. So we're going to run a quick ad, and I've got our first live guest in studio here, and she will join me in a moment, and that's Lindsay Seewald.
Algodex is owned by Algonaut. This is great new technology just coming online now in the digital currency world. Algodex is a great way for you to use the digital currency Algorand in your day-to-day transactions. Can you imagine a world where we don't have to buy a cup of coffee using the federal dollar, and you don't even have to use the American federal dollar? You don't have to use the euro or the pound sterling. You can use real money, digital currencies that are not at the beck and call of governments and inflation. The Algodex is making digital currencies usable in a day-to-day basis.
And looking at that one, right? So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for your patience as we got it together. We've got Lindsay Seewald from Alberta Proud in studio again. You've been here before.
I have, yes.
And you guys have been busy. And speaking of holding Liberal ministers' feet to the fire, you wrote a column for the Western Standard talking about Uneven Stephen. So do you want to expand on what that was about?
Well, he's unbalanced and he's uneven, and we like to call him Uneven Stephen, but you might know him as Stephen Guilbeault, who is our Minister of Environment. It's kind of struck a chord with a lot of people when he was brought into cabinet. I think it was 2019, and then more recently appointed to this position. So if you don't know who he is, he's a former convicted eco-radical. That's really the best way to put it, of Greenpeace and Equiterre. And he's got these really big, crazy ideas to phase out oil and gas, potentially within the next 18 months, although he's tried to backpedal on that. And we're just calling him out for who he is. We think his policies and his general message, and he and Trudeau together just are very dangerous for Alberta energy and oil and gas. We produce the cleanest energy in the world right here. It provides jobs. It makes the country go around. We're the economic engine of the country. We talk about this all the time. And we're going to stand up for Alberta energy, and we're going to take a stand against Uneven Stephen.
Well, it's good. And he's put into he's in a senior cabinet position. I mean, everybody's seen those images out there of him in his orange jumpsuit, grinning ear to ear, too. I mean, this is a man completely unapologetic for doing exactly what his government now has invoked a form of martial law to ban other people from doing, which is civil disobedience. I think he was hanging off of the CN Tower with a bunch of protesters, if I recall, like a bunch of dingleberries up there against oil and gas or something in the past. And this is a man now who is got Trudeau's ear.
And I mean, what message is that sending to the world? What message is that sending to our investors in Alberta? It's the wrong message.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it makes it difficult. We got a time when energy prices are getting higher all around the world. Gas, of course. I mean, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, I mean, we don't want to take advantage of a terrible, dangerous situation, but it affects world commodities. And Alberta and BC, Saskatchewan are all very well placed to produce a lot of energy to fill that void. I mean, as those prices are rising, but when we got somebody that hostile in Ottawa, it's going to be hard to draw those investors to bring in the capital to get everything up and on stream.
Yeah, I agree. And, we're poised for success this year. 2022, I think, could be our year in Alberta, the best year that we've had in a long time. Our budget was based on $30 a barrel oil, and here we are approaching $100 a barrel. Like, it's an exciting time for us to come through this pandemic. Hopefully we're through it, right? Yeah. We're just about through it. And it's onwards and upwards. But, when at the federal level, we have these archaic fossil ideas from Uneven Stephen and Trudeau to ban, block, and barricade. I mean, this is 1970s style of activism. Like, it's not working anymore. Their ideas are fossil ideas. So we have the best energy right here. Our pipelines are the safest way to transport it. And we stand by that. And their alternatives are unreliable, supplementary forms of energy like solar panels and wind turbines and, even electric vehicles. When you look at all the little components that are used to make these, some of these parts are made, in countries where they employ child labor, and they've got these chemicals leaching into the ground. I mean, it just makes no sense. Like, I think people are pushing past this and they're starting to see, the leftist elites and call them out for what they are, which is trying to demonize our oil sands.
Well, and likewise with their natural gas and other resources. I mean, we're going to be talking about that more at length at the pipeline later on this afternoon, ironically named program of ours that we run every week. But the CGL activity, which isn't making nearly enough news, there was an organized eco-terrorist attack upon a pipeline construction facility. And the government's been virtually silent on that because these are the kind of people, not to say, look, Guilbeault got that far with, physically assailing, but they're sympathetic to that sort of activity. I mean, it's hard to get our stuff to market. Liquid natural gas is a huge growing market right now. We don't have a single facility built yet. We've been talking about it for decades, but we're allowing these activists to keep stalling it and blocking it. Likewise with the Trans Mountain pipeline. And now the costs are going through the roof. This thing isn't done yet. I'm not going to believe that thing's going to run until we see oil in it. And right now, the government's saying they're not going to spend any more money on it. That's distressing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget that the European Union has declared natural gas a green energy. So it's time for our Canadian government to get on board. So, look at what we're seeing, though, on the federal stage, right? So it all really fits together.
Yeah, and it's distressing. I mean, we're coming into a period of it's just ideologically selfish and wrong to shut in petrochemical resources right now when we need them and the world needs them. I mean, the world's coming into recovery from the pandemic. So what these guys want to say, and that's what really ticks me off with them, they want to cut off developing nations from clean burning, relatively inexpensive energy sources such as liquid natural gas. They don't want them to have that. They feel that somehow they're going to build windmills or continue to burn animal dung and wood as an energy source. I mean, it's almost a form of cruelty in my view. I mean, I know I'm adding my editorial, but to have a federal government that's so focused on this crazed shutting in of petrochemical resources, we got to call them out on it.
Well, it's an elitist globalist ideology, and what we're saying over here at Alberta Proud is we've got all the answers right in front of us. It's called carbon tech. It's taking the CO2 right out of the air and turning it into actual usable everyday products. And we have that ability right here. And last time I checked, a carbon tax didn't take any CO2 out of the air. So
no, and we don't get the credit that quite often happens. I mean, the oil field, the energy sector has been bending over backwards, trying to find ways, whether it's carbon tech, for converting carbon into usable products or sequestration or just the reduction of the production of carbon at all in the first place. We keep the amount of emissions per barrel has been dropping dramatically over the years.
Absolutely. And we can win the race to net zero emissions. We can do it right here.
But the government keeps moving the goalposts.
I know.
So, and it gives more incentive for investors to bother coming in. And again, Guilbeault seems to be right at the core of this. I mean, him and actually Butts, who often has Trudeau's ear because he's got a history of eco-activism behind him as well.
They all do. So, Yeah. Well, we can hope, the events over the last couple of weeks and everything that's taken place in Ottawa. I mean, maybe finally we have the ear of the complacent voters out there, and maybe this time we're going to get there.
So Alberta Proud, I mean, we'll explain a little bit more about your organization. Like, who are you and what are you up to try and push back? How are you helping engage people to stand up for these resources?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most people who know us because of our Facebook following. We have a Facebook following of over 200,000 people. We're very grassroots. We're run by everyday Albertans like me, a mother of 3, small town girl, and we connect with everyday Albertans, right? The guys out in the oil sounds and, the moms at home with kids. And I think, our basic message is we stand for common sense governments, smaller governments, more affordable governments. We're calling out the hypocrisy of elitist politicians and celebrities who are calling out our oil sands and that sort of thing. So we stand up for everything Alberta, from our beautiful landscape and our mountains and our factories to our farms to our pipelines, and we really do stand up for more Alberta autonomy. That is a really big piece of what we're doing. We want to have more say in our decision making, in how our money gets spent. For example, last fall during the election, we pushed really hard for an equalization referendum, and moving in that direction. Yeah, we just want more say. And later on this afternoon, actually, we're launching another campaign, which is calling on Premier Kenney to go back to his roots and stand up for having our own police here in Alberta. I think everything that we've seen in Ottawa over the last weekend and the aggression that was displayed by, Trudeau calling on police and our CMP to behave that way, it's disgusting. It was upsetting. And we think it's a really good opportunity to go back to that conversation and push the Premier to take some steps in that direction.
It's good because, the Fair Deal panel, and I'm on their case a lot about that. They went around, there was definitely support on the ground from Albertans. We want to see these measures. We've been talking, and it's getting near time to move, Premier Kenney. Let's get on with this thing.
I think, with the pandemic, it was hard to kind of come out with these big ideas and that sort of thing. But now that we're getting through this, now that we're poised for such economic success in this province, let's get on to some of these big ideas, because we need more autonomy. Albertans deserve more. We need a better deal.
Yeah, and we're getting that breathing space with the energy and commodity prices right now. So, it's time to focus. You're not worrying about just looking at the cupboard and trying to figure out how to make ends meet. We've got the means. Let's do some stuff, as I was saying, outside of where you guys have gone. But it's time to look into things like the teachers union and their disciplinary abilities, things like that. Get back to where you were. It's not all pandemic. Part of the name, I guess, though, is that Alberta Proud. We're proud of ourselves. We love it here. Treated as if we should hang our heads in shame, though. There is a lot of that from patronizing Central Canada and leadership. So,
yeah, and I think we've seen that ever since the economic downturn. What's it been now? 7-8 years of that, and we were treated as outcasts. And where was Ottawa? Where was the Eastern politicians and standing up for us at that time? And if you look at now, we're distracted by the pandemic. We're distracted by the Freedom Convoy. We're distracted by Trudeau shenanigans. But we got to take a look at who's our friends here. Premier Legault and the Quebec government want to ban hydrocarbons. This is ridiculous. They want to ban the exploration of that. They want to put a stop to Alberta companies going out there discovering these resources, and then they want to put a stop to it. We can't forget to look at what's really going on and how damaging these leftist elitist governments are.
No, this morning we got up, it was in the minus 30s. The only thing keeping us alive were petrochemical products. Let's face it, that's a reality. We've got to inject reality into the discourse. And with people, as you said, as uneven Stephen Guilbeault are, you're not going to get reality from him.
Oh, absolutely not. There's nothing relatable. They can't relate to the average Albertan, the average Canadian. So, and we've got our carbon taxes hitting an all-time high. Next month, it's going to hit 170 a ton, like million a ton. Where do we go from here? You got your heating bill last month. I got mine. Can barely afford to pay it. Canadians are having to make a choice between putting food on the table and paying and keeping the lights on, keeping the heat on.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder. That is April 1st when that keeps going up with this. And they lied. They said it was going to cap out at $50. No, it didn't. They just keep adding to it. And as we've seen in BC, they've had the carbon tax for a long time. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. BC's emissions have not gone down. So,
well, how does a tax take carbon dioxide out of the air. How is the tax reducing global emissions? It's not. It's the gig is up. It's false.
Yeah, it takes money out of your wallet. That's all it does, and makes us a less viable place to set up, raise your family, or invest dollars. I mean, I think that's part of the intent. They want to drum us out of business, and it's unfortunate. Alberta, April 1st, it's no mistake that they chose that, and not just for the April Fools.
The irony's not lost on me, Cory.
but the other part is that's the time of the season also when it gets warmer. So our energy bills are going to come down, and we're not going to crank up the air conditioning in yet until July or August, perhaps, if we've got it. So no, there's no mistakes. They don't do things by mistake. They do things wrong often, but not by mistake. So let's just hike that cost so people don't quite notice it on their bill until it skyrockets in July, and they keep sneaking it incrementally, frog and water. And the only way they get away with it is if we don't call them out. So that's what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, we're going to keep hitting them hard. And, we encourage people to follow us on social media and visit albertaproud.org and sign up on our email list. We send stuff. We run campaigns all the time. And we encourage ideas from you, funny memes. Those of you who follow us on Facebook probably notice we send out, we get people in because we attract them with humor. If you can't laugh about all of this, then what's the point? So.
Oh yeah, and I love memes. I mean, you can get a serious message into a funny package.
You can, and that's how people are reading. They're reading shorter, funnier, more visuals, and it works. It's a great way to connect with people.
Oh yeah, I mean, for those who don't want to read one of my long scowling columns, I mean, there are some of those. You can do both as well, and those memes can inspire. I mean, I can look at a meme sometimes, and that's what gets the vein pulsing, and I have to start hammering out a piece and. They can get a message across. But yeah, I've been to the Alberta Proud, Facebook site quite often. I've stolen memes off you guys and then throw them out on Twitter. Yes, get out and share them. But it's modern communications. It's the way things work, and people do things in bites. So you guys are doing a great job so far.
Thank you. So are you guys. I think, to all the viewers out there watching, keep up with the Western Standard, all these online publications that are, away from alternative media. There was polling out the other day that the majority of Canadians don't trust mainstream media any longer. And I think we need to look to alternative media sources like you guys. So keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, we're stubborn that way. Well, thank you very much for coming in. It was good to see you again today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And again, we'll be into the new studio, I'm certain, by the next time we get you back in. So there'll be a little more space and we'll have a good chat then.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Algodex is owned by Algonaut. This is great new technology just coming online now in the digital currency world. Algodex is a great way for you to use the digital currency Algorand in your day-to-day transactions. Can you imagine a world where we don't have to buy a cup of coffee using the federal dollar, and you don't even have to use the American federal dollar? You don't have to use the euro or the pound sterling. You can use real money, digital currencies that are not at the beck and call of governments and inflation. The Algodex is making digital currencies usable in a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so that was Lindsay Seewald of Alberta Proud, and they do have a website as well, and I believe a Twitter presence. But as she said, there's a couple hundred people follow them, a couple 100,000 people follow them on Facebook, and that's where they post things and keep up with things. Plus, they do submit guest columns to publications such as ours, and we get them out there. So check these guys out, and they're standing up for us and fighting the good fight. A lot of all what they're talking about too can apply to Saskatchewan, BC. We're all in that same resource-based place, and we've all dealing with a hostile federal government. So, getting back to that, in case you hadn't noticed, I mentioned that with Lindsay, is cold as hell out there. So let's take a moment to give thanks to our petrochemical energy sources, those things that are keeping us alive today. And there's that great Alberta Twitter account, Reliable Alberta. It's a Reliable AB, and they give regular updates. I believe it's some sort of bot. It's beyond my technical means. I'm on Twitter all the time, by the way, but this one gives updates on what's keeping us all from freezing to death right now. And they put out numbers on where our power is coming from and what percentage of it's coming from different sources. So I grabbed the numbers before the show. And at that moment, 85.7% of Alberta's electricity is coming from fossil fuels. Wind is at 49.9% capacity. So it's a halfway capacity. It's kind of breezy out there. That makes up 10% of our generation. Solar, this is an easy one to read, 0.0% capacity, and producing, of course, 0% of our total generation. And we are importing 511 megawatts, or 4.5% of our energy. So we're actually getting, even though we're an energy capital as a province, somehow we're importing some of it to make up for things. I guess probably all those solar panels that are doing absolutely nothing right now as we speak. Decades. It's been decades. I mean, I was a young man when I remember the government talking about subsidizing these solar projects and these windmills and things that were going to take us all off the fossil fuels. Guys, we aren't even close. If we had switched and transitioned all the way over to that as Al Gore wanted and other individuals, right now we'd be freezing to death. We'd be splitting apart the furniture in the home and burning it to try and keep warm. So check those guys out. You know, that reliable AB on Twitter. They are a good account worth following and keeping up on those things. So let's see. Yeah, Cory B. Morgan, Nico has put that up there. Follow me on Twitter. That's one of my favorite places to vent and get out there and interact with people. Those, if we're not interacting on the comments here. Twitter, again, it can be a bit of a cesspool, but it's a great place to see news as it breaks and keep up with things. So somewhere more in the news here. Banks have frozen nearly $8 million now in accounts held by the Freedom Convoy trucker supporters. It's from the Department of Finance. They disclosed it yesterday. And they did confirm that donations, as Dave mentioned that, as little as $20 could trigger retribution if the cash was contributed after it was declared an illegal assembly on February 15th. As it said, they said it would be unlikely that someone who gave $20 3 weeks ago or even $20 post would have been captured by a freeze, said the Assistant Deputy Finance Minister, but also said it's not impossible. So that's how brutal it could get. If you gave $20 on a whim, you didn't look deeply into the issues or didn't really think about how they're declaring things illegal or legal or whatnot, you reached in and just felt, I want to support these guys. I think their peaceful thing is a good cause. I want to add a couple bucks to their Bounty Castle fund. You could be finding yourself right now unable to pay your mortgage, unable to buy groceries, unable to make your car payment. You could be having your life ruined. And people understating, oh, it's not martial law. BS, it's not martial law. I went into that yesterday. When you suspend civil rights, when you suspend civil law, it's martial law. And that's what they've done. I mean, they can seize your money without a warrant, without any oversight, without any second check. I mean, where are they getting the lists for this? Where this $20 went here and there, pressuring banks? That's martial law, guys. And we're stuck under it. And so somebody could find themselves in terrible financial distress if they even donated $20 to a cause that the Prime Minister doesn't like. What an insane world we're stuck in. Now, of course, they tried to make their excuse saying, well, we're saving Canada from sedition. These people were going to take over the government if we left them there. You could tell, all those people waving flags and sitting in bouncy castles and hot tubs. They were definitely on the brink of storming Parliament and taking it over or breaking away a part of the nation. Come on. And there was a Senate committee that was heard, talking about that. And apparently it's a secret cabinet. There's evidence of sedition, but it's confidential information justifying the police actions. And they won't show the senators what this information is. Well, how are they supposed to rule on whether or not this emergency is called for if they won't be given the evidence, the facts? These are the senators. These are the guys determining whether this act is coming or going. I would say you should absolutely just vote against it. Obviously, I would say they're absolutely lying to you. If they had the information, they'd be more than happy to put it out there, wouldn't they? They want to justify the thuggery. They want to justify the arrests of hundreds of Canadian citizens. They want to justify trampling them with horses and pepper spraying them and seizing their bank accounts, publicly shaming them, holding people without bail. So if they had evidence that this was to protect us from a big movement of sedition, show us. Show the senators. No, they won't even show them. That tells me they don't have it. They don't have it. Probably some garbage like, we had somebody monitoring a Facebook group and somebody said, let's take over the government. And, it was an anonymous commenter, but it was to be taken seriously, right? Come on. It's nuts. But of course, we do have a member of parliament who went on with that stupid internet rumor that honk honk means Hail Hitler. Come on. This is what our policy is down to. We are invoking martial law on the thinnest possible evidence. It's absurd and it's dangerous. And if they get away with it now, what excuse are they going to use to do it down the road? People say a slippery slope argument is shallow. Well, it's a real one. Look at the precedent we're setting right now. An extremely dangerous one. Every time Trudeau gets upset with something, he can call martial law, invoke the Emergencies Act. We know Mr. Singh will more than happily support him. That's all you need now. There's no other sense of oversight. And as Nico's put up, in about 6 or 7 minutes, we'll have Jeff Callaway coming in. So I'll talk about a little more stuff. Let's see what some of these commenters. Somebody saying, FOI, Pamela Jones, Kenny, a freedom of information requests, started implementing them. We put them out there, and there's again legislation. But what happens with freedom for information, and we try. In fact, Melanie did one with the city of Calgary recently. Melanie Risden here at the Standard. And she got back a bunch of baloney and didn't get the information that she wanted. You see, if you've ever seen some other FOA requests, what they'll do is send back a document and it'll say, oh, here it all is. And they've redacted just about everything on it. So it's all blacked out. And here's, a few sentences, email from this person to this person at this date. But once you get past dear such and such, it's gone. Otherwise, they might just say no because it affects national security. That's what I'm talking about with that BS evidence of sedition. You see, they're going to use that excuse for anybody trying to dig deeper. They won't even tell senators. So they won't tell a senator. They're not going to tell us. We can keep trying, though, and we will. Another thing they like doing with freedom for information requests, I believe we put one out for, because they were always talking about this evidence of checking wastewater in cities, and how it was going to indicate whether the pandemic was on the rise or the fall. And we wanted to see that information. We wanted to see the nuts and bolts of what's going on there. And we put the request in, and they came back with this because you got to pay for these. And they said, okay, yeah, we could do that, but it'll cost you, I think it was like $12,000. They said, it's like, hey, we're doing really well at the Standard, but we don't have 12 grand laying around for a freedom of information request. And they know that. That's their way of saying we abide by the act. We respect freedom of information, but it's going to cost a lot. Come on. It's not the days where you're going to have to send file clerks for 3 weeks to go digging around in a dusty basement to get this information. You can put one bureaucrat on it for probably 20 minutes and pull up what we wanted. That's just their way of saying we're not going to share it with you. And we had a Quebec Senator, Mark Gold. He said, frankly, it's clear all of the country is affected by this movement. And he's the government representative in there. And he claimed cabinet had secret reports justifying its February 14th order, calling it a public emergency. Well, show us. Show your fellow senators. I mean, this is just your word, Mr. Gold. I'm afraid the word of a Liberal senator is crap. The word of a Liberal member of Parliament is crap. Certainly the word of your leader, Trudeau, is crap. We need evidence. We need to see something. This mad rush to grab power. And I'm watching even the Globe and Mail, and other Liberal-friendly publications are starting to say, what's your reasoning for this Emergencies Act? We need a reason. Ottawa's cleared out. The border's not blocked anymore. There's nothing going on. We're stuck under martial law for 30 days at this rate. Why? Why are you maintaining this on us? You and that worthless, spineless man, Jagmeet Singh. Yeah, the left have been getting upset with me when I keep poking at Jagmeet Singh. Well, too bad. Your leader's a dish rag. Tommy Douglas, I talked about it the other day. He was the founder of the NDP. He was the main man. He brought the Canadian healthcare thing. He's an icon. He's a god to them. He opposed the War Measures Act back in 1970 when there were bombs going off, when people were getting murdered, because they're trying to say it's principle now for the NDP to support the use of this kind of act. Tommy Douglas would not have supported this for a second. The old Liberal NDP, I should say, they were labor leaders. These acts typically were turned against them. It was usually against like the Winnipeg protests when they came out back in the 20s, I think it was, when there were general strikes. And the governments would send thugs out to beat people down on the behest of industrialists and rich individuals. That's what protecting the citizens, it was important, and it came first. And the NDP doesn't do that anymore. Now Singh is just hand in hand with Justin. Hey, let's suspend civil rights over bouncy castles. What an embarrassment. And the mainstream media, I love bashing them. It's not just self-interest that's driving people to us. They've been horrible. They've been terrible. I talked about that fight the other day, with the New York Times, a very liberal publication. And they dared to point out that people were arrested at gunpoint in Ottawa. And holy cow, the columnists, even supposed freelancers, Ling and others, oh, it's a lie, it's BS. And they called them us, particularly CBC ones and butts. And it turned out, here's all the pictures. Actually, yes, it really happened. There's no retraction, no apology. But why didn't the mainstream media have any pictures of those gunpoint arrests? they did have people on the ground. They had people all over. They got the resources. You ever see a CBC crew? Holy cow. We go out duct taping cameras to tripods to get our live footage out there. We're getting better. But I mean, CBC, they got a small army of people. Somehow none of them saw any of those gunpoint arrests. And in fact, they called anybody who reported on them liars. They obviously saw the gunpoint arrests. They chose not to document it. They chose not to share it with Canadians. They chose not to report on it. They chose not to do their job. And then they tried cover up when somebody, a foreign publication, actually did their job for them. That's why independent media is so important, because the mainstream media is corrupt. It's broken. And I mean, there may still be some good journalists in there. They got to pay their bills. They're staying in because they want the security of the job. But they got to just weep at night at the garbage they're forced to deliver now to make a living. Ignore them. Go away from them. Leave them. And as Nico's brought up, go to the westernstandardonline.com. Take out a membership, guys. $10 a month. You know, we've been doing great. The members support us. We can get that better gear. I won't have to worry about Derek cutting his finger again as we rush to set up a tripod, because I'll buy a better unit for it. Just keep those memberships coming in. Free trial for 2 weeks if you haven't signed up already. And you'll get full unfettered access beyond the paywall and be able to see all of our products, columns, breaking news, all of those things. And it also supports us so we can keep getting more reporters on the ground and covering things, because we need them, obviously. If we don't have them on the ground, the mainstream media won't report these things for us. And then we end up missing out. I mean, what a big distinction, right? Whether there was firearms and gunpoint arrests or not. You know, this is a yes or no question. And the mainstream media actually thought they would get away with calling the others the liars. I guess they thought nobody else would have taken pictures of that. But they did, and they embarrassed themselves. And now let's talk about, you know, our Canadian diplomats abroad. Oh, okay, good. I think we're going to get on to our next guest right away. Speaking of protecting assets and government coming after our ability to take care of ourselves. And that is Jeff Callaway with Algonaut Capital. And we're going to expand on the complicated, but not so complicated once you get it laid out to you, world of marketplaces for digital currencies and other assets. So we'll run a quick ad here, and Jeff is going to join me.
Algodex is owned by Algonaut. This is great new technology just coming online now in the digital currency world. Algodex is a great way for you to use the digital currency Algorand in your day-to-day transactions. Can you imagine a world where we don't have to buy a cup of coffee using the federal dollar, and you don't even have to use the American federal dollar? You don't have to use the euro or the pound sterling. You can use real money, digital currencies that are not at the beck and call of governments and inflation. The Algodex is making digital currencies usable in a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so there was the ad for Algodex, and we're going to go a little further into what Algodex is and what they provide and what they can do. I've got Jeff Callaway in here, the CEO of Algonaut Capital. And I just want to frame this and point out, I mean, we're in a crazed period where the government is actually coming in and taking people's assets. They're taking their bank balances. They're leaving people in some terrible positions. There's definitely, you know, there was almost a small bank run there recently over this, and people are looking for new ways to store their assets. So that's kind of what you guys are facilitating, I guess, just to begin with, in a sense.
Yeah, well, to be clear, like, cryptocurrency in general has really grown in a lot of prevalence and exposure, and it's really getting into the mainstream right now. It has a lot of strengths. It has a lot of things that people should be wary of as a newer technology. And of course, people are probably a little more generally familiar with Bitcoin and Ethereum and that, but cryptocurrency evolves technologically as well. And the crypto that we're actually basing our platform off of is Algorand. And so with the different kinds of cryptos out there, Algorand is really the leading at the leading edge of technology in cryptocurrency. And what that really means is you can get your transactions processed in a couple of seconds. Algorand is highly secure. It's never been hacked. You know, and it's entirely scalable as well. And your transaction fees are minimal. A couple of pennies per transaction. So what we've done is we've created a marketplace for all of these digital assets to be transacted. And so if you think of it like a digital eBay, where you can buy and sell all kinds of cryptocurrencies and other assets as well, including non-fungible tokens. And, fortunately in the crypto space and with some of those really leading edge investors, we've enjoyed a lot of support from them. And ultimately, we're hoping to become a public company here in the next handful of months.
Okay, so and your platform, I guess you could call it, just became live recently, and I know you were quite nerved out as it was approaching, as any new venture. I mean, you guys have been working on it for a long time, and that took off quite successfully.
Yeah, it really did. We are, with Algorand being one of the top cryptocurrencies out there, there was a lot of demand in the ecosystem, in the community, for a product like what we're providing to be able to transact different securities. And so, we just launched it a little over a week ago, I guess it was. We had kind of a test net kind of version. So we've launched on mainnet now. We've got tens of thousands of users and tens of thousands of trades and hundreds of thousands of different unique IP addresses and wallets checking the website. And it's not even available at this moment in Canada and the US. We'll be rolling that out very shortly, but it's most of the interest is frankly from all around the world. We have so many people from Southeast Asia, in particular, that are looking at using this and able to transact and send money around the world. And really just to give a bit of people kind of wonder about like, what's the use case for this and how can I use it, or why should I even use cryptocurrency? And if you think about just a simple example of you want to send some money to somewhere, and you want to go to your bank and wire some money to someone. Sometimes that can take even a few weeks, depending on the currency that you're using. And with using something like a cryptocurrency or to a buyer and a seller, you can do that almost instantaneously and almost little to no cost. So it's almost as quick as a snap of a finger. And I think crypto will become more in use as time goes on, as we're seeing just our government fiscal and monetary policies blow up our government balance sheets. We're looking at interest rates starting to rise, possibly a little bit. I'm a little skeptical on that because the governments are the biggest indebtors, and of course they would be the biggest payers of that interest. So, and they happen to control the central bank. So it's sort of like.
So. And there's interesting questions as it's coming up. I mean, I think a lot of what people are concerned about too, though, is security. And I see a commenter, Judy and Jim Jurwatowski, wondering about, she's hearing, and I mean, there's a lot of confusion going on that even, these cryptocurrencies, digital currencies could be seized or frozen by the government at this time. Can that happen, or is it? From what I kind of gathered, is that they can get your bank accounts and things, but if you've got it in an independent wallet, they're out of reach of the government.
And this is actually the value of what a centralized exchange versus decentralized. And one of the strengths in the crypto world is this decentralized. It's called decentralized marketplaces and that. And what that means is no one actually has control. For us, with Algodex, which is the platform that Algonaut owns, Algodex is decentralized. We actually don't know who the users are. We have no custody of any of the assets. If the government came and told us today that you can't, we'd have to freeze some users' bank accounts or assets, we actually cannot do that. There's actually no way for us to actually do that. So as an individual, as long as you are know that you're invested in or hold your assets in a wallet that is, of this decentralized nature, then you can always keep control of it, and the government actually can't go after you. We have seen a couple of cases where some hackers, like there was a Colonial Pipeline ransom event where they wanted to, the hackers actually used Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, through tremendous government resources, was able to be tracked down, and that ransom actually brought back. So you have to be, if you're extremely concerned about that government seizure. You just need to have a good idea of what how you hold your money and your assets, and that it's in a decentralized type of function rather than a centralized one.
Great. And the practicalities, that's, I see Donna Johnston, another commenter, and you started on that, I mean, it's a good way. The old days, if you wanted to send money across to somebody, you'd have to go to Western Union and pay a terrific fee to send them. And now you could do e-transfers at the bank, but if people aren't comfortable with the bank, aside from those though, I mean, when are we going to get more to day-to-day use then if you've got a lot of your assets in a digital form?
Right now you're starting to see some credit card issuers where you're able to actually, it's like a prepaid credit card where you can use cryptocurrency as the asset that's held, kind of like if it was a Canadian dollar prepaid credit card. Starting to see that out there a bit, but really this is one of the differentiators of like the technology that we use versus Bitcoin or Ethereum. So ideally, for crypto to be used in a common, society type of perspective, you need to be able to go to the coffee shop, buy coffee for $1, and it's only going to cost you like a tenth of a penny or so in a transaction fee, kind of like paying with your Visa, be as fast as paying with Visa. But right now, if you use Bitcoin, it can take you up to an hour for that transaction to be final, which means you have to stand at the till for an hour, and that's not going to work for anyone. Either your coffee's awful cold, doesn't work for the vendor, and your transaction fee, depending on how busy the network is, your transaction rates fluctuate. So it's not just a percentage of the transaction, but your $1 coffee may end up costing you $10 because the transaction fee is $9. So, with the platform that we use, that transaction fee is always going to just be a couple of pennies. The transaction's closed in a couple of seconds. And that's the kind of technological progress that, at least on the Algorand protocol that we use, that we can start to bring towards more retailers. And it opens up a lot of opportunities for us, frankly, on Algodex, because as another level of service that we're wanting to bring out is the ability to actually transact, stocks and bonds and real estate and all kinds of other assets, even to the extent that we could, I'm not going to get into non-fungible tokens too much, but your house, for example, I could put an offer out on your house, Cory, and just like a standing bid. And if you saw, someone's put an offer out on my house, you might choose to accept that or not, and that transaction could happen extremely quickly. So.
Yeah, as you said, it's broader. It's an eBay sort of thing. It's and that's where it gets a little complicated. A fair question out of Cheryl Dawn, though: how does Algonaut make their money? Like as you said, there's a transaction fee, and then of course you're there to make money. And people are worried about that. They want, well, what's a fair amount of charge or such? So where's that land?
So there's a couple of different methods that we're in heavy investment mode right now. Actually, as I'll put it, but with the platform, there will eventually be some transactional fees, but right now it's no charge to actually use it. And so if you're transacting, there's no transaction fees for us, other than Algorand has that little small sort of couple of pennies transaction fee. But we're working on building market share and trying to build up the user base. So as more users come in, then there's more liquidity and there's more assets that are trading, and we become kind of a one-stop shop for people to buy and sell various kinds of assets. So.
Okay, and Ken was asking about other services and things. I guess automated deposits, for Canada Pension deposited to an account, things like that. So how it really works is you have a wallet. I mean, you can imagine like you have a wallet right now in your back pocket or in your purse or something, and from a digital perspective, you would go onto the exchange, and then you can spend some money, or you can sell something, and you get that cryptocurrency back into your wallet. And then if you want, you can convert that back into your regular bank account, or just keep it in your wallet and let it grow, hopefully grow from there. So that's kind of the simple thing. And then what this technology allows us to do is once we can roll out something
as a more payment processing type of platform, which may well be in our future as well. Then you start establishing relationships with a lot of like the Tim Hortons I see referenced here. You buy coffee at Tim Hortons, and we'll probably have to launch that on a very pilot basis. But we're not there yet. But we've got a big tech and engineering team that we're constantly hiring for. So back-end engineer, coders, we're hiring. Send us your resumes, check us out.
Yeah, we're all in growth mode, which is a good thing. And I mean, things change fast. I mean, for those of us who are getting a little grayer, and I remember it was inconceivable that you could make a point of sale purchase with a debit card or a credit card without signing and presenting ID. And so it just seemed almost overnight. It took a few years, and suddenly, bang, we're tapping for purchases. I got to admit, I rarely carry cash anymore.
I agree. And, even the speed of technology and how it's improving and really bringing people together. I mean, you think about Facebook. Facebook's maybe 10 years old now, and it's like ubiquitous throughout society now. You think of it's just like this natural thing. But, you go back 15, 20 years and, it's the pace of technology it's quite something. I mean, that's one of our slogans really is digitally connecting anyone to everyone. And that's really true on a global basis. Like I can't tell you how many conference calls and meetings I have with people all around the world. Like we have tens of thousands of people in these social media groups that follow us. And, it's Indonesia and Vietnam and Poland and Croatia and China and Hong Kong and Taiwan and New Zealand, everywhere. It's amazing.
It'd be useful for companies that are import-export you're dealing with foreign. I mean, you're not dealing with differences in exchange values as well because you're using the same currency. But along that, there's another area people are concerned about. I mean, Bitcoin values have been, like a seesaw and a number of other digital currencies. And how do you mitigate that risk? I mean, I know part of it is people make a living out of that. That's what the marketplace, if you want to, try and buy in and sell at highs and lows like anything else, you can do that. But if you're looking for practical use, you don't want to suddenly see your savings drop in half.
Well, and that's just, that's one of the things with Bitcoin, for example, is you do get that volatility with a lot of cryptos that you can buy. You do get that volatility. And so when you think about, your Canadian dollar, we see the reports of the Canadian dollar. Oh, the Canadian dollar's up half a penny today. Oh my God, it's a big move. Well, like that's a couple minutes in crypto world. So there's different kinds of cryptocurrencies. It's kind of a misnomer to just think they're all the same. So like Bitcoin is really just like digital gold, but it doesn't have a lot of use cases. Algorand is much more of like a programming language. And then you have other types of cryptos called stable coins, which are tagged to the value of, say, the US dollar or even the Canadian dollar, most commonly the US dollar. And so that's probably the most stable way to keep your assets in the cryptocurrency world, but on a more stable type of currency. Like, for example, look up USDC if you were wanting to have your assets in crypto, but tied to the US dollar.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, it's just people look at stability. And if you're looking at the long game, I mean, some of the ups and downs are fine with some of the currencies. It all depends on the individual use you want to do in that world, I guess. And as you pointed out, which is worth noting, that there's a number of different ones and they'd have different applications. Not saying one's bad or poor. It depends on what you want to do. Yeah.
And Algorand for us, it's really, it's like an enhanced programming language. It's kind of like in computer world, you had, BASIC as your original language. And now you've got all of these new programming languages like TO and C++ and Python and I will leave that to the
Sure. I'll finish with one more question because it's still, I mean, we're ironing out a bit because I've always still been a little confused, and the more we talk, the more it makes sense. But somebody's saying, is this primarily an investment or a banking service that you guys are providing, I guess?
Yeah. So I want to be clear, like we're a marketplace allowing people to transact back and forth. And in terms of an investment, well, Algonaut is or will be hopefully a public company. We're going through the listing process on a Canadian stock exchange in the next few months, and so that holding company, you would be able to invest in the stock. But we also have Algodex, and Algodex has tokens that do trade in the crypto sphere. We'll be launching that actually in the next month or so. So check out our website for updates on that.
Okay, yeah, and you mentioned those non-fungible tokens, and I don't.
Yeah.
That's a whole separate show. That's a confusing area. It's a huge growth area, though, that's happening all over. Maybe we'll have a talk about that at another time, because that's another big part of what you guys are going to be setting up.
Yeah, we're setting it. Well, we already have the functionality to transact all those NFTs. There's a lot of NFTs out there that are basically like, graphics artists creating little interesting animals and headshots.
There was a girl selling farts in a jar, actually. Yeah. She made a fortune, which is, again, fodder for another show.
They took your idea, Cory. Yeah, like, what the?
I don't think I could find a market for it, but I mean, either way, we're getting in an interesting world of where different assets can be traded in ways that we never imagined before. And then a piece of art, versus some of the more grisly things that have been going around. Where do you trade these safely, like anything else, or invest? So,
and that's the important thing with the evolution of all of this. I mean, like, it's extremely important for us to be compliant with the regulations around the world. I mean, really, we operate a global business, so we are so cognizant of remaining compliant for not just for ourselves, but our customers as well. So that's why it's not Algodex isn't available to trade yet in Canada and the US, but we will shortly here because we want to make sure that we are fully compliant, so that because I would say in probably a little more of the old Wild West days of crypto, that there wasn't a lot of regulation around that, and so there were a lot of things that were being transacted and done that wouldn't be on the up and up, I would say.
Yeah,
so
fortunately. So, I mean, it's stabilizing. Well, thanks for coming in and explaining much more about what Algonaut and Algodex and Algorand are all about, and we'll look forward to seeing the business develop as time goes there, Jeff.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Cory.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Algodex is owned by Algonaut. This is great new technology just coming online now in the digital currency world. Algodex is a great way for you to use the digital currency Algorand in your day-to-day transactions. Can you imagine a world where we don't have to buy a cup of coffee using the federal dollar, and you don't even have to use the American federal dollar? You don't have to use the euro or the pound sterling. You can use real money, digital currencies that are not at the beck and call of governments and inflation. The Algodex is making digital currencies usable in a day-to-day basis.
Great. So yeah, that was Jeff Callaway, as you saw with the ad, and he is a sponsor, full disclosure, but I'm trying to keep it careful. As Jeff said too, there's other digital currencies out there. Some might be good for some and some not, for others, but it's a developing whole market and world, and people are looking for new places to take their assets, to take their investment, to keep their money. We're seeing it's at risk terribly with the seizure from the federal government as it sits. Or as Jeff also pointed out, we might see interest rates rising, which will suddenly nail you. Or as somebody else pointed out in the comments, though, if the government doesn't want that because they'll suddenly start paying money. But no, the taxpayers will pay more money. But the government would rather that money went into some of their own pet projects rather than on debt interests. So they don't have much interest in having interest rates go higher than they have to, I would think. But I mean, we just can't trust government with bloody anything these days. So either way, follow up on that if you're more interested. We like to expand those discussions, even if they're a bit dry, because it's important. And we're in a world moment of insecurity like we haven't seen before. Let's talk about government. I'm looking at some of these other news articles. This is from Blacklocks. So auditors have uncovered widespread irregularities in the use of government-issued charge cards when Canadian diplomats go abroad. So when they go to those great love-ins, such as in Davos and so on, or I think the other one was in Dublin recently, was it? Or it was in Ireland. But, environmental summits and things like that, where friends and family, the government can go and live in luxury and pat themselves on the back and feel self-important. Well, the audit showed that these employees are billing taxpayers, unsurprisingly, for things like liquor, jewelry, and hospitality expenses. Yeah. So 31% of the sample had insufficient document to demonstrate compliance with policies and directives. If you worked for a private company and they sent you overseas to do some business, and of course you expense some things, it makes sense. That's fine. You're doing your job. But if you come back and 31% of your documentation doesn't show you complied with, what you're allowed to spend on, your company's going to say that's coming out of your paycheck. And if it's too high, we're going to call the police. It's fraud. Now, in this case, many cases, the receipts and invoices alone were insufficient to determine compliance because often the context within which the transaction took place was missing. And that's part of it. So, I mean, if you bought a dinner because you were meeting with somebody important, fair enough. You know, it happens in business, it happens in government, and you expensed it, and that means some liquor got expensed. It might be understandable, but you have to explain the context. Otherwise, maybe you were just partying. Was it a business-related meal, or were you trying to pick someone up? What were you doing with it? So they investigated $929,000, $1 million worth, and people say, "Oh, it's just a drop in the bucket of government." Look, it's our money, and they're stealing it. And as I said, if you were in a private market, you would be audited. They would follow up. You would be fired, or it would come out of your check, or you could be charged. So these guys, out of that 900,000, 12,000 of it was on booze. 14,000 was just marked as leisure costs. And this is just the stuff, not that this, 30% of it, they didn't even know what the heck it was. 117 for jewelry. That's pretty small, but what the hell are they buying jewelry for? How can you expense that? That's where our money's going, guys. This is where Trudeau's little crowd. When we talked about before, the people who do the cannon fodder runs for office for the Liberals and things like that, what happens? Their rewards, they get these sorts of jobs. And this is the sort of stuff they do. Let's see, 20,000, 23,000 spent under budget line items identified as health and beauty. What? Haircuts? I guess, Trudeau's hair is probably expensive. Those false eyebrows, whatever they're doing with him. It wasn't Trudeau over though. This was his diplomats. What do you mean health and beauty? Oh, spa time? Makeovers? Makeup? Perfume? Is that really what we're supposed to be paying for? 27,699 for, in quotes, personal purchases. Cheryl says Botox. I've been thinking of trying that. Nobody's going to pay me to get the crow's feet away from my eyes. So, that might be where some of it went, though. I guess that's the health and beauty. Probably actually literally is, I guess. Expensive things. Hit a clinic while you're over there. Get your Botox before you go. 98,000 for hospitality. 27,700 for, in quotes, personal purchases. Well, doesn't just the nature of it being personal purchases means it's not expensible? This is how they're managing your money. It's supposed to be your money. 164,000 in airline tickets. But you see, these were expensed above and beyond the trip. That's why it's in their expenses, not in, their tickets are covered. These guys fly first class already. So I don't know what this is. Well, I got a good idea. They tend to like flying their family members, friends, mistresses, whatever it might be, for their trip out there, and they expense it. And they get away with it. These are the people that have us under a state of emergency. These are the ones who are stealing your money for daring to donate to things. This is extremely, extremely disturbing, yet this is where we're at. How about some other things in the news? It's been a few weeks since the protests began, and now have been ripped down. But at the start of it, there were some people screaming and yelling, saying, it's also going to be a super spreader. Look at all these unmasked people getting together in Ottawa. They're all gathered. Has there been a spike in cases in Ottawa? We are forgetting COVID now over all these protests and everything. We're forgetting the numbers. What's been happening? Was it a super spreader? Has they been spreading mass casualties through Ottawa due to the shared hot tubs and bouncy castles? Yeah, I hate sharing hot tubs anyways. I'm sure there's a few things you can mix. But COVID wasn't a problem. The numbers are going down in Ontario. They're going down everywhere. It's gone down. We should be laying off the public rather than cracking down further. But either way, all of those fears that people were trying to spread did not come to be. They didn't happen. We're all safe. There was no super spreader. Let's get on to, I got to talk about one more sponsor of ours before we're finishing today too. Please indulge. It's important. These are how we pay our bills, as well as besides you guys who are subscribers. And that is the Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys have been sponsoring us for a while. Let's talk about our rights. Let's talk about things government wants to take away from you. They want to take away your firearms. They've made no secret of that. They're constantly coming up with excuses. Look at that. They come up with false reasons of sedition, apparently, going on that they won't tell senators about. And they feel the Emergencies Act is justified with that. Well, maybe they'll lie about sedition and say everybody's little blinking .22 rifle now is going to be used in active sedition and things like that. And we're going to have to ban them and take them, as they've been doing constantly. Well, the Canada Shooting Sports Association is pushing back. They're standing up for you because they've got 3 legal challenges against the government right now on your behalf as a responsible legal firearm owner. They need your help too, though. you got to join them. You know, I mean, if we don't help ourselves, nobody else will. I think we're all learning that with the Convoy and things in general. So check them out. Plus, they have all sorts of other resources. I mean, just as a firearms owner, they got all sorts of stuff to help you keep enjoying your firearms responsibly as you already have been. And they want to fight to protect your right to keep doing it. So go check them out. Canada Shooting Sports Association. You can search them out, or if you put it in directly, CSSA-CILA.org. I think it must be that French translation, but they are a national thing. And hey, we do have a lot of our Quebec cousins and such all enjoying firearms as well, of course. You know, they should be enjoying those rights, and the government's trying to take them. So, a lot of freedom talk. There's going to be a lot more. Tomorrow I'm going to have a political scientist on, Marco Navarro-Gini, and we're going to talk about, again, the implications of maintaining this Emergencies Act and carrying on. And I'm going to talk with Cameron James of Indie News Now. If you remember him from last week, he was on the ground in Ottawa giving us updates from the protests as the police were moving in on them. We're going to be speaking with him and getting his summary of what he's seen, what he's currently seeing. He's still out there. That's his turf. It'll be, you know, of course, enlightening. We don't get a clear picture from the mainstream media. We need guys like Cameron out there who can get on the ground and cut through the BS and give us direct news on those sorts of things. So be sure to tune back in tomorrow, guys, at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. We got good guests. I'll have more rants. And later on tonight, we will have another episode of The Pipeline where Dave, Derek, and I are going to discuss a number of issues. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all tomorrow.